The Tag Heuer Formula 1, should you or shouldn't you? It might not be the ultimate value prospect on the surface, but I think if you dig a little bit deeper, there might just be something there. Let's start with the history. Many people are well educated on it, I think, on the Heuer side. So Jack Heuer was a prominent figure in the Formula 1 paddock. He initially convinced drivers to start wearing his watches. He followed it up with a Ferrari sponsorship deal, and Heuer became the official timing partner for Formula 1. But what lots of people don't know is that prior to Techniques d'Avant-Garde, Tag, purchasing the Heuer watch company, they were already involved in Formula 1. They sponsored Williams from 1979 to 1981. You can see the sponsorship here on the FW08. So both companies actually had a history in the sport before the takeover. So on January the 1st, 1986, Heuer officially became Tag Heuer, and the first watch that they launched was the Formula 1. So this was actually inspired by the Swatch. This is the 1980s, remember, so bright colours and new exciting materials, fiberglass, composites, plastics were all the rage. But the Formula 1 was always a much more premium offering than the Swatch. So it was constructed of fiberglass, bright and bold colours were the order of the day, and it was powered by a Swiss quartz movement. And it might not sound very exciting now, but it was actually hugely practical. It was, of course, heavily shock resistant, it was 200 meters waterproof, it was lightweight, it was highly accurate, and as such it was actually worn by the McLaren pit mechanics during the Marlboro sponsorship era. So the cars were famously red and white, and the watches, of course, red case, white dial. So the mechanics' wrists were all matching their main sponsor. So it worked really well. And the watch was a huge sales success. So from 1986 until 2000, when the initial production run stopped on the Formula 1 range, they'd sold more than 3 million units. And then it was relaunched in 2004, new design, upgraded materials, and it's been refined steadily since then to the products that it is today. It's an attractive and mature entry-level Swiss watch, available with automatic and quartz, unlike the early offerings, which were, of course, quartz only. It's significantly different in terms of the build quality and materials now from the 80s models, but there's still many of the same design cues, and it's unmistakably a Formula 1. In terms of actually the sponsorship and involvement with the sport, Tag Heuer sponsored McLaren from 1985 to 2006, and then in 2006 they switched to Red Bull, citing that Red Bull was a young, dynamic go-getter, perfectly consistent with the Tag Heuer strategy. So despite all the Rolex billboards at races today, Tag Heuer is still the official timekeeper of the Monaco Grand Prix, the Automobile Club de Monaco, and of course the aforementioned Red Bull F1 team. I think before we look at the watch, it's really important to understand the history of Tag Heuer as a collector, to see some of the added brand value that you're buying into, especially when you consider the elevated prices compared to some of the other competition from Swiss manufacturers. So, with that in mind, let's take a look at the watch. Okay, and here we are with my own Tag Heuer Formula 1 with the Caliber 5, the automatic, and this is with the anthracite dial and the black bezel. So, dimensions wise on this, we've got 43mm in diameter, with 13mm thick, and lug to lug, well, if you were to fold down the bracelet here, you'll see actually the first link protrudes. So I've measured from here to here, and I make it 54.8mm. So I would say if your wrist is significantly shorter than that, then you might struggle to get a good fit with this one. Sapphire crystal on this with a nice amount of anti-reflective coating. In terms of finishing on the case, polished sides, as always collecting the fingerprints. The crown on this one is really nice, it's easy to grip, and you've got a nice red band which matches the second hand with the nice red tip there. I picked this colorway because I love red accents on watches, but too much red and it becomes difficult to pair the watch with most outfits. So yeah, it's a versatile piece with a sort of sporty touch, I think, in terms of the colorway. Looking a little bit closer at the dial, so you've got the Tag Heuer printed there at the 12 o'clock, Tag Heuer printed again in text form at the 6 o'clock. I'm not sure why it had to be there twice. I think it should just say Formula 1 and caliber 5, but that's all printed. You've got Arabic applied indices 12 and 6, and then around that regular applied markers, all filled with lume. All the hands feature polishing, and you've got the Tag Heuer shield as a counterbalance there on the seconds hand, and the date window at the 3 o'clock with a small white printed box around it there. Looking at the bezel, so you have this very typical sculpted grip. It's very Tag Heuer. I think they've had this for quite a long time in the Formula 1 range. And the bezel itself, I think, instantly recognisable as part of the Formula 1 range. The font and the Tag Heuer, again, the shield logo at the top there at the 12. In terms of the feel on the bezel, just give it a twist. There is a tiny bit of backplay, but I mean, it's absolutely marginal. So it's tight bezel. Everything is well aligned, as you would expect at this price point. In terms of the movement inside this watch, this is an interesting one. So Tag Heuer call it the caliber 5, as you'll see once again on the bottom of the dial. Doing a bit of research, I believe it's essentially an ETA 2824-2. Sometimes they change the rotor on it. Now Tag Heuer call this an in-house movement, so I don't know if that means they're just buying the parts from ETA and then assembling it in-house and calling it an in-house movement, which I think is a little bit cheeky if so, or if there's something more that Tag Heuer could say about it to justify why they would call it in-house on the website. So if anybody does know the specifics of that and an exact answer, then please do let me know, because I would be really interested to hear about that. So looking at the case back here, I'll have to just blur out the serial number. Standard affair for the Formula 1. I had a couple of Tag Heuer Formula 1s in hand before, quartz models prior to having this one. Same case back with the checkered pattern, Tag Heuer logo just below that, and then the model number and serial number. And around that, you've just got a couple of specs: sapphire crystal, water resistant 200 meters, stainless steel, and Swiss made since 1860. And the whole of the case back is brushed on this particular model. So just taking a look at the bracelet, it's relatively simple, fully brushed, 3-link stainless steel. It does have brushed sides as well. So you have a milled inner rather than a pressed on these newer Formula 1s. I've noticed some of the older ones are pressed. I purchased mine last year and I have the milled clasp, and that was from a jeweler's in Las Vegas. I have seen on Joma's shop they're still selling obviously older models of this variant, and you can tell it's older because it still has the pressed clasp. I think milled is an essential really at this price point, and something that we really should demand. Nice brushing again on the bottom with Tag Heuer engraved just there, and that's a push button deploying clasp. One of the really nice things about this watch is when you interact with the crown, it is silky smooth. I mean, it really feels like a luxury watch. When you're unwinding the crown, when you're winding the movement, it's buttery. When you're setting the time, there's a nice resistance there, but not too much. Date change is almost bang on. It clicks over straight away. You don't have the slower date change like you do with some of the more budget movements with the Miyotas and with the Seikos. And yeah, if you just pull out one click, obviously you have your fast set on the date. There we go. Just turn that the right way. So yeah, the crown, really good. The crown action, and just in general, the quality on the crown is absolutely awesome. I think that's something that I really like about this watch. And just looking now on the time grapher, -4 seconds per day, 324 on the amplitude, no beat error. Got to be pretty happy with that. So what don't I particularly like about this watch? Well, first thing is the lug-to-lug measurement. A couple of websites say it's 20 millimeters. It's not. I measure it at 21.5. So if you want to change the bracelet, you're really stuck to buying options from Tag Heuer, or if you can find anything at 21.5, but it's an extremely uncommon size, and I feel like they've done that deliberately to force you into buying their own bracelets or their own straps. The second issue that I have with this watch is the diver's extension. So I don't think
many, if anyone, is going to go diving with this watch. If you do, then please correct me. But it's a very flimsy affair, just cheap, pressed, nasty. It doesn't really suit the watch. It would be far nicer to have a ratcheting mechanism with micro adjust, where you could get comfortable in the summer, rather than having this, which I don't think most customers and most people who purchase this watch are ever going to use. My next critique is push pins on the bracelet. I think when you're spending this kind of money on a luxury watch, we really expect screws. So I'm really disappointed with this. For most people who buy this watch and the typical customer, if they're only going to buy it and have the bracelet adjusted once by the local watchmaker, they'll never notice. But for watch enthusiasts, it's definitely something that we're going to pick up on, and definitely cheapens it a little bit, in my opinion. The next thing I'm going to pick up on is the relatively weak lume. So these indices are actually raised quite significantly off of the dial. So there's the option to have a lot of layers of luminescent paint there. And I think Tag Heuer really missed a trick with that. And it comes across as sort of a cost-cutting measure. The lume is okay. It's functional. You can put the watch on your bedside table at night and you can read the time in the pitch black room the next morning. But it's nothing special, and it could have been, because you've got the opportunity to fill those indices with, 15, 20, 25 layers of luminescent paint. So my third point is that I think the transitions could be improved. For example, on the side of the case here, where you're going from brush to polish, I think a nice chamfer would really step this up. And on the side of the bracelet, I think chamfered edges would really add a little bit more class and justify the asking price on these watches just a little bit more. So that's the areas I'd improve, but I still have a lot to like about this watch. So yeah, let's reach a conclusion.
To conclude with the Formula One, I think it's an important question as to how much you value the history of the brand and of the Formula One line. If it's something that you really buy into, then I think it is worth the money, and you can create a special bond with the watch. If you really don't care at all and you're looking for ultimate value, then you might be somewhat disappointed. And I think it's important to bear in mind when you talk about Tag Heuer, they do have bigger overheads than other companies. You look at the amount of marketing they do. Obviously they're maintaining brick and mortar stores on major high streets. So I think that also bumps the prices up a little bit compared to some of the competition. I still think it's an awesome watch. I really enjoy wearing it, but I am well aware of its shortcomings, and I do find that Tag tend to be very slow to adapt to things. To only have just gone to the mill clasp from a press clasp in the last couple of years is horrendously slow development. And the fact that they still have the tinny divers extension, the relatively weak lume, yeah, it's a very, very slow evolution, never a revolution. So depends, temper your expectations with it, but it's really personal preference. I couldn't recommend this watch for everybody. There's some amazing alternatives from Longines, from Oris, from Rado, from Tissot. I mean, the list could go on. So I really hope you've enjoyed the video. I'd really be keen to hear your thoughts on anything to the Formula One range, or just Tag in general, Tag Heuer, take your pick. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you did enjoy it and would like to see more of the same, and I will catch you on the next one. Cheers!